the silent watchers, the last hope of Karathi Prime, on the outer rim of the Andorian spiral, where three great star systems met in cosmic harmony, lay the beautiful world of Karathi Prime. For over 2,000 years, the Karathi had lived in perfect peace. Their crystal cities gleamed like jewels under twin suns, and their people had mastered the arts of healing, music, and stellar agriculture. They had no armies, no weapons of war, only the gentle protection of the Galactic Federation's peace treaties. But peace, the Karathi learned too late, was a luxury not all species respected. The Vex Empire had been expanding for decades, consuming worlds like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships were massive, dark constructs that blocked out stars wherever they traveled. The Vex themselves were silicon-based beings who saw organic life as nothing more than inefficient waste. They did not conquer for resources or territory. They conquered because organic life offended their perfect, mechanical order. High Chancellor Mirren stood on the observation deck of Karathi Prime's orbital defense station, watching helplessly as the last of their pathetic fleet burned in the void. The Karathi had never needed weapons before. Their few defensive ships were little more than cargo vessels with energy shields. Against the Vex war machine, they lasted. Less than an hour got below on the planet's surface. Evacuation sirens wailed across every city, but there was nowhere to run. The Vex had surrounded the entire system with their massive dreadnoughts. Each ship was the size of a small moon, bristling, with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. "How long do we have?" Mirren asked her science officer, Dr. Yalin, though she already knew the answer would bring no comfort. Vex bombardment patterns suggest they will begin surface cleansing in 47 hours, Yalin replied, his normally steady voice shaking. "They want our cities intact for their colonization protocols." 47 hours. Less than 2 days for an entire civilization to find a miracle. Mirren closed her eyes and made the hardest decision of her life. She activated the quantum communicator, the most powerful transmission device the Karathi possessed. Her message would reach every corner of the galaxy, transmitted on all emergency frequencies. "This is High Chancellor Mirren of Karathi Prime. Our world is under attack by the Vex Empire. We are a peaceful people with no military capability. We ask any civilization capable of assistance to please help us. We offer everything we have in exchange for our survival. Please, someone help us." The message burst out across space at faster than light speeds, carrying the desperate hope of 8 billion souls. The galaxy's silence, the distress call, reached the Altarian Republic first. Their crystal-based council deliberated for exactly 12 minutes before deciding the risk was too great. The Vex had never been successfully opposed. Better to let one world die than risk their entire civilization. The Centaurian Trade Federation received the message during their quarterly profit summit. They calculated the potential loss of trade routes if they opposed the Vex. The numbers did not justify intervention. On Tellara, the bird-like Tellarans held an emergency session of their War Council. These proud warriors had fought countless battles across the stars, but even they knew better than to challenge the Vex directly. "We honor their courage," the war chief announced, "but we will not commit suicide for strangers." System after system, civilization after civilization, the response was the same. Sympathy, regret, but no action. The galaxy had grown comfortable with peace, and comfortable beings rarely risked everything for others. The Galactic Federation's Emergency Council convened on the neutral station of Haven Point. Representatives from 47 major civilizations gathered in heated debate. Some wanted to authorize a rescue mission. Others feared it would only provoke the Vex to expand their campaign. Ambassador Quellen of the Hydron Collective spoke for many when he said, "The Karathi chose to remain defenseless. We cannot sacrifice our own people for their naive pacifism." The debate raged for 18 hours while the Karathi countdown continued. But the message had traveled farther than most realized. Beyond the civilized core worlds, past the trade routes and diplomatic stations, the signal reached a small, unremarkable system that most star charts labeled simply as Quarantine Zone 7. The forgotten world Earth had been isolated from Galactic civilization for over 3 centuries. The official records claimed it was a death world, populated by an unstable, violent species too dangerous for contact. Most civilizations had forgotten it existed. Those who remembered preferred it that way. The truth was more complicated. Humanity had made first contact with the galaxy during their early space exploration period. The meeting had not gone well. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when diplomacy failed. After a series of incidents involving human traders, explorers, and one particularly memorable bar fight that destroyed half a space station, the Galactic Federation had voted to quarantine Earth. For the safety of all civilized species, the official declaration read, humanity had accepted the isolation with characteristic stubbornness. If the galaxy did not want them, they would build their own path among the stars. 300 years later, human settlements dotted dozens of systems beyond Federation space. They had grown strong in their exile, forged by the challenges of hostile worlds and the constant threat of pirates and predators that thrived in the lawless outer rim. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, humanity's largest military installation. She was reviewing patrol reports when the Corinthi distress signal came through their long-range sensors. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're picking up an emergency transmission from inside Federation space." "It's a general distress call." Sean frowned. Human stations monitored Federation frequencies out of curiosity and caution, but they rarely intervened in galactic affairs. "Put it through." The message played, filled with desperation and fear. A peaceful world facing extinction, begging anyone for help. The command center fell silent. Finally, Commander Jackson, Chun's second-in-command, spoke quietly. "They're not asking us specifically. This is going out to everyone." "And everyone is ignoring it," Chun replied, checking her tactical display. Intelligence reports showed no Federation fleets moving toward the Corinthi system. How long until the Vex finished them? Based on their usual patterns, less than 2 days. Chun stared at the tactical display for a long moment. The Corinthi system was deep in Federation space, far from any human territory. Helping them would mean revealing humanity's true strength to a galaxy that had spent centuries believing they were barely civilized savages. But that same galaxy was about to let 8 billion innocent people die rather than risk confronting. "The Vex, send a message to Corinthi Prime," Chun ordered. "Tell them help is coming." "Admiral, are you sure about this?" Jackson asked. "The political ramifications will be someone else's problem." Chun cut him off. "Prep the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. Full combat load. Ma'am, if we do this, there's no hiding what we've become. The galaxy will know we've been building our strength out here." Chun looked at the star chart, where the Corinthi system pulsed like a dying heartbeat. "Good. Maybe it's time they remembered why they were afraid of us in the first place." The response to the message reached Corinthi Prime 18 hours before the Vex bombardment was scheduled to begin. High Chancellor Meering was in her emergency bunker, trying to coordinate the evacuation of her world's children to the inner shelters when the communication came through. "Corinthi Prime, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Colonial Fleet. We received your distress call. Help is en route. Estimated arrival in 16 hours. Hold your positions and do not surrender. Humanity remembers its friends." The message was brief, professional, and utterly bewildering. "Humans?" Dr. Yallen looked confused. "I've never heard of them. Are they a Federation species?" Mirren was already accessing the Galactic database, searching for any reference to this mysterious civilization. What she found made her blood freeze. Quarantine Zone 7, she read aloud. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Status, contained due to extreme aggression and unpredictable behavior. Warning, do not approach, do not engage. Notify Federation authorities immediately if contact is made. They're sending monsters to fight. Monsters, Yalin whispered. Mirren stared at the warning for a long moment, then closed the file. Better monsters than extinction. The arrival 16 hours later, the Vex were preparing their final bombardment when space itself seemed to tear. Apart at the edge of the Karathi system. What emerged defied every conventional understanding of space travel. The human fleet didn't use the standard hyperspace lanes that most civilizations relied on. Instead, they ripped holes in reality itself, their ships emerging from what looked like burning wounds in space-time. The technology was clearly beyond anything the Federation possessed, but it was the ships themselves that truly shocked the watching galaxy. Human vessels looked nothing like the elegant, graceful designs favored by most species. These were brutal, angular constructs that looked more like flying fortresses than spaceships. Their hulls were scarred and blackened, showing the marks of countless battles. No decorative elements, no artistic flourishes. Just pure, functional lethality. The lead ship was massive, nearly half the size of a Vex dreadnought, but somehow more threatening. Its hull bristled with weapon ports, launch bays, and sensor arrays. Along its side, in stark white letters, was painted a name that would soon become legend: Defiance. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical display. The Vex had 17 dreadnoughts and over 200 support vessels surrounding Karathi Prime, a formidable force that had conquered dozens of worlds. Humanity had brought 43 ships. Admiral, reported Commander Jackson, the Vex are transmitting on all frequencies. They're demanding we withdraw immediately or face destruction. Any response from Federation forces? Negative. Still no sign of intervention from any major power. Shun nodded grimly. The galaxy was content to watch from a safe distance, while others did the bleeding. Open a channel to the Vex fleet, she ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the insectoid face of a Vex War Master. Its mechanical implants gleamed as it spoke in the Universal Translation Protocol. Unknown vessels, you have entered a Vex military operations zone. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. We do not recognize your species or your authority here. Chun studied the alien commander for a moment and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. War Master, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Colonial Fleet. We don't recognize your authority either. You have 30 minutes to withdraw from this system before we remove you. The Vex commander's mechanical parts whirred in what might have been laughter. You bring 43 vessels against our grand fleet. Your mathematics are flawed, humans. Our mathematics are just fine, Chun replied calmly. We've had 300 years to perfect them. 29 minutes, War Master. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Around them, the human fleet spread into attack formation, their movements precise and coordinated. All ships report ready for combat operations. Jackson announced. Chun looked out at the stars, where 8 billion innocent lives hung in the balance. Somewhere beyond sensor range, the civilized galaxy was watching, waiting to see if the monsters they had banished could save the victims they had abandoned. Begin Operation Thunderstrike, she ordered. The battle for Karathi Prime was about to begin. Asterisk, when monsters fight monsters, the dance of death. When the 30-minute deadline expired, the Vex War Master expected to crush the human fleet with overwhelming firepower. The silicon-based warriors had conquered 47 worlds using the same basic strategy. Massive ships, superior numbers, and pure brute force. They had never fought humans before. The battle began not with the thunderous exchange of energy weapons that most spacefaring civilizations expected, but with something far more terrifying: silence. The human fleet simply vanished. One moment, 43 ships hung in space near the system's edge. The next, they were gone, leaving only empty vacuum and the confused scanning attempts of Vex sensors. Where did they go? War Master Zek-9 demanded, his mechanical implants clicking rapidly in agitation. His tactical officer, a younger Vex whose organic parts had been almost entirely replaced, studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. Unknown, War Master. They appeared to have simply disappeared. What the Vex didn't understand was that humanity had spent 3 centuries fighting in the lawless regions beyond Federation space. Out there were pirates, raiders, and worse things hunted among the stars. Survival meant adapting. Humans had taken the stealth technology they'd stolen from a dozen different species and perfected it beyond all recognition. The human ships hadn't disappeared. They had simply become invisible to every known form of detection. The first sign of their presence came when the Vex dreadnought Eternal Conquest suddenly erupted in flames. Something had struck its primary weapons array with surgical precision, crippling its main guns in a single devastating blow. Before the Vex could react, 3 more dreadnoughts suffered similar strikes. Each attack targeted critical systems with an accuracy that spoke of detailed intelligence and careful planning. Impossible, War Master Zek-9 muttered. Our shields should have stopped any conventional weapon. But humans didn't use conventional weapons, the art of brutal efficiency aboard the Defiance. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The opening phase was proceeding exactly as planned. Torpedo strike successful, reported Weapons Officer Martinez. 4 dreadnoughts partially disabled. They're having trouble coordinating their defensive fire. Sean nodded. Human torpedo technology was unique in the galaxy. While most civilizations focused on energy weapons or simple kinetic projectiles, humans had developed something far more devious: multi-stage, adaptive warheads that could adjust their attack pattern based on target defenses. The first stage was a conventional explosive that depleted shield strength. The second was an electromagnetic pulse that disrupted enemy systems. The third was a cluster of micropenetrators that burrowed into hull breaches and detonated inside critical systems. It was a weapon designed by a species that had learned to win through cunning rather than overwhelming force. Phase 2 is go, Chon announced. All ships execute razor formation. Across the Karathi system, the invisible human fleet shifted into a new attack pattern. Instead of the traditional line formations favored by most military forces, they adopted something that looked almost organic, a swarm-like arrangement that allowed each ship to cover the others, while maximizing their collective firepower. Vex tried to adapt, spreading their own forces to counter the unseen threat. But fighting an enemy you couldn't see was like boxing shadows. The second wave of attacks came from multiple directions simultaneously. Human ships materialized just long enough to unleash devastating barrages, then vanished again before return. Fire could find them. Each strike was precisely coordinated, targeting specific subsystems to maximize damage while minimizing the risk to human forces. On Karathi Prime, High Chancellor Mirren watched the battle from her command bunker, unable to believe what she was seeing. The Vex fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was being systematically torn apart by an enemy they couldn't even locate. How are they doing this? Dr. Yalin asked, staring at the tactical display in amazement. They're not fighting like any civilized species, Mirren replied, though there was awe in her voice rather than condemnation. They're fighting like like predators. She was more right than she knew. The hunter's instinct humanity had evolved. On a world where survival meant being both predator and prey, every human carried the genetic memory of ancestors who had hunted massive beasts across ancient savannas, who had learned to work together to bring down creatures far larger and stronger than themselves. 3 centuries of isolation had only sharpened those instincts. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves, each ship playing its role in a deadly choreography that the Vex simply couldn't comprehend. When the Silicon warriors tried to concentrate their forces, the humans scattered and struck from unexpected angles. When the Vex spread out to cover more area, the humans concentrated their attacks on isolated targets. War Master Zek 9 had been programmed with the tactical knowledge of 1,000 battles, but none of his data had prepared him for this kind of warfare. His forces were being defeated not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through a kind of strategic thinking that his logical, mechanical mind couldn't process. "They fight without honor," he transmitted to his remaining fleet. Commanders, without logic, without pattern. But there was a pattern. The humans were simply following rules that no civilized species had ever needed to learn. The rules of Vul, survival in a hostile universe. The third phase of the battle began when the human ships suddenly became visible again, dropping their stealth systems to reveal their true positions. For a moment, the Vex commanders felt a surge of hope. Finally, they could target their enemies properly. That hope lasted exactly 37 seconds. The human ships that decloaked were not the same vessels that had disappeared hours earlier. During their invisible approach, they had been reconfiguring themselves, combining and separating in ways that Vex sensors had failed to detect. What had been 43 individual ships was now 17 much larger, heavily armed platforms, each bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. "All units," Admiral Chun's voice echoed across the human fleet, "you are cleared for full engagement. Show them what 3 centuries of exile has taught us." The weapon they never saw coming, the human ships unleashed hell, but it wasn't the kind of hell that most galactic civilizations would recognize. These weren't the elegant energy beams or graceful missile swarms that dominated conventional space warfare. This was something far more brutal and personal. Human weapons had been designed by engineers who understood that in the outer rim, you didn't just need to defeat your enemies. You needed to terrify them so badly that their allies would think twice before coming after you. The first weapon to activate was something humans called a sunburst cannon. It fired a concentrated beam of plasma that burned at temperatures exceeding the core of a star. Where it struck Vex ships, entire sections simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that they left nothing behind but glowing particles. Second was worse, the hive mind disruptor. Humans had discovered that the Vex relied on quantum entanglement to coordinate their forces across vast distances. The disruptor severed those connections, leaving individual Vex units confused, infused, isolated, unable to work together effectively. But the weapon that truly broke the Vex morale was the Ghost Maker. This device didn't destroy enemy ships outright. Instead, it interfered with their life support systems in subtle ways, creating the illusion that the ship was haunted by invisible presences. Lights flickered, doors opened and closed on their own, and phantom sensor contacts appeared throughout the vessel. For a logical, machine-based species like the Vex, the Ghost Maker was psychological warfare at its most devastating. They couldn't fight what they couldn't understand, and they couldn't understand something that violated their fundamental assumptions about how the universe worked. The price of survival. Within 6 hours, the mighty Vex fleet was reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. Of the 17 dreadnoughts that had threatened Curathy Prime, only 3 escaped the system intact. The rest were either destroyed or abandoned by crews too traumatized to continue fighting. War Master. Zec-9's final transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear it. We withdraw from this system. The humans ... The humans are not like other species. They do not fight with honor or logic. They fight like the void itself has taught them its secrets. We will not return to this place. But victory had come at a cost that the Karathi were only beginning to understand as the human fleet moved into orbit around their world. High Chancellor Mirren received a request for a face-to-face meeting. Admiral Chun wanted to come planetside to discuss ongoing security arrangements. The human shuttle that landed at the capital spaceport was unlike any vessel the Karathi had ever seen. It was built for function rather than form, with thick armor plating and weapon mounts that could have come from a military fighter. Admiral Chun emerged wearing what appeared to be formal dress uniform, but even her ceremonial clothes were clearly designed for combat situations. She carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had seen battle and survived it. "High Chancellor," she said with a slight bow, "I'm glad we could help." Mirren studied the human woman carefully. She looked relatively normal, bipedal, similar height to a Karathi, though her build suggested much greater physical strength. But there was something in her eyes, a hardness that spoke of experiences no peaceful species could imagine. "Admiral Chun, my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You saved our entire civilization." Chun's expression remained neutral. "We were happy to help, but I need to be clear about something. This isn't over. The Vex will regroup, and when they do, they'll come back with a larger force. They don't like being humiliated. Then what do we do?" "You have 3 choices," Chun replied. "First, you can try to rebuild your defenses and hope the Federation finally decides to protect you. Based on their response to your distress call, I wouldn't recommend that option." Mirren winced. The Federation's abandonment still stung. "Second, you can request relocation to human space. We have several worlds that could accommodate your population, and we'd guarantee your safety." "And the third option?" Chun's smile was sharp. "You can let us teach you how to fight." The galaxy's new reality, the Battle of Karathi Prime, sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For 3 centuries, the major civilizations had dismissed humanity as a violent but primitive species confined to the outer rim. Suddenly, it was clear that humans had not only survived their exile, but had used it to become something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Emergency sessions were called on dozens of worlds. Intelligence agencies scrambled to reassess the threat posed by human expansion. Military planners began developing new strategies to counter tactics they didn't understand. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed the concept of civilization itself. For millennia, galactic society had defined civilization as the absence of violence, the triumph of diplomacy over warfare. Species that couldn't embrace peace were considered primitive, dangerous, unworthy of inclusion in the greater community. Asterisk. The Karathi crisis had revealed the flaw in that thinking. When true monsters like the Vex emerged, when diplomacy failed and genocide loomed, only other monsters could provide salvation. High Chancellor Mirren made her choice 3 days after the battle. Standing before the Karathi High Council, she announced that her people would accept human protection and training. "The galaxy showed us that peace is a luxury," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. "We will learn to defend ourselves, even if it means becoming something we never thought we could be." The decision was controversial. Many Karathi feared that accepting human military training would corrupt their peaceful culture. Others argued that their culture was already lost, that a species that couldn't protect itself had no right to claim moral superiority over those who could. Admiral Chun, for her part, was brutally honest about what the training would involve. "We won't make you into humans," she told the assembled council. But we will teach you to think like survivors. That means accepting that sometimes violence is the only answer to violence. It means being willing to become the thing your enemies fear most. The price of protection. 6 months later, the first Karathi soldiers graduated from human military academies. They returned to their homeworld, changed in ways that their families struggled to understand. The gentle, contemplative beings who had left were replaced by individuals who carried themselves with new confidence and barely contained lethality. The transformation wasn't just physical, though the human training regimen had made them stronger, and faster than any Karathi in recorded history. The real change was mental. These new soldiers thought differently, planned differently, and most importantly, they were willing to do whatever was necessary to protect their people. When the Vex returned 18 months later with a fleet twice the size of their original force, they found a very different Karathi system waiting for them. The orbital defenses were human-designed, but Karathi-built, incorporating the best of both species' technology. The defending fleet combined Karathi scientific innovation with human tactical doctrine. And leading the defense was Admiral Miran. The former High Chancellor had given up her political position to command her world's military forces personally. The Second Battle of Karathi Prime lasted only 4 hours. This time, there were no Vex survivors to carry word of their defeat. Back to the Empire. But victory came with a price that extended far beyond the battlefield. The Karathi had saved their civilization, but in doing so, they had lost their innocence. They were no longer the peaceful, scientific species they had been for millennia. They had become something new, something that could stand against the darkness that lurked between the stars. The new Alliance word of Karathi's transformation spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees. Other peaceful species began to take notice, particularly those living near the expanding borders of aggressive empires. The Federation tried to maintain its traditional stance, condemning human involvement in galactic affairs and calling for a return to diplomatic solutions. But their words rang hollow when entire civilizations faced extinction. One by one, worlds began reaching out to humanity, not for trade or cultural exchange, but for the one thing humans had perfected during their exile, the knowledge of how to survive when the universe wanted you dead. Admiral Chun found herself at the center of a growing movement. What had started as a rescue mission was becoming something much larger, the foundation of a new kind of alliance, one based not on shared ideals or economic interests, but on the simple understanding that survival sometimes required embracing the monster within. "We're not trying to conquer the galaxy," she explained to a gathering of representatives from 17 different species. "We're not trying to impose human values or human government. We're offering something much simpler, the knowledge that it's better to be a living monster than a dead saint." The alliance that emerged from those meetings would eventually be known as the Survival Compact, a loose confederation of species united by their willingness to fight for their continued existence. They didn't share languages or cultures, or even basic biology, but they shared something more fundamental, the understanding that in a universe full of predators, prey species that wanted to survive had to become predators themselves. The lesson, learned years later, when historians tried to understand the significance of the Karathi crisis, they focused on the tactical innovations, the political ramifications, the shift in the galactic balance of power. But the real lesson was simpler and more profound. Civilization was not defined by the absence of violence, but by the wisdom to know when violence was necessary and the strength to apply it effectively. Humanity, the species the galaxy had tried to forget, had become its most unlikely teachers. They had shown that monsters and protectors were often the same thing, viewed from different angles. And in a universe where true predators roamed between the stars, that lesson was worth more than all the diplomatic treaties ever signed. The galaxy had cried for help, and humanity had answered with fire. In doing so, they had reminded everyone of a truth that civilized species preferred to forget. Sometimes, fire was exactly what was needed. The monsters had saved the day, and perhaps, in the end, it made them the most civilized species of all.